Tonight, imagine standing alone on a rocky cliff where the sea crashes endlessly below. Behind you lies a small stone lighthouse, battered by wind, salt, and storms. Ahead stretches only darkness and water. At first, becoming a lighthouse keeper sounds peaceful, almost romantic. You live beside the ocean, watch sunsets, and guide ships safely home. Unfortunately, the reality was far less dreamy, because this job often meant isolation, exhaustion, and nights filled with relentless responsibility. Your day began before sunrise because the lamp could not wait for comfort. The glass had to be cleaned carefully, soot removed, fuel checked, and mechanisms inspected. A single mistake could dim the light that sailors depended on. That meant every morning started with maintenance instead of rest. While others woke slowly with warm tea and conversation, you climbed narrow stairs carrying heavy supplies, already thinking about tonight's dangerous weather and rough sea below. Stay vigilant. The stairs inside many old lighthouses felt endless. Spiral steps twisted upward through narrow stone walls, often damp from sea air and coated with salt. Every trip demanded effort, especially while carrying oil cans, cleaning cloths, or spare parts. Some towers rose more than 100 feet, which meant countless climbs every single day. Your legs burned, your back ached, and you knew you would climb them again before nightfall, every single day, tirelessly. No rest came easy. Cleaning the lens was one of the most important tasks. Lighthouse lenses were engineering marvels, designed to magnify light across astonishing distances. But beauty came with maintenance. Salt spray, dust, smoke, and grease could reduce brightness if ignored. Every surface had to remain spotless. You cleaned carefully, knowing one smudge might weaken the beam during dangerous weather. Imagine carrying the burden of knowing invisible dirt could someday help cause a shipwreck far out at sea tonight. Then came the waiting, which sounds relaxing until you understand what kind of waiting this was. Lighthouse life often meant long stretches of silence broken only by wind, gulls, and crashing waves. There were no crowded streets, no neighbors nearby, and often no easy way off the island or cliff. Isolation became part of the job. Some keepers handled solitude well. Others struggled badly. Human beings are social creatures, and endless silence can slowly become heavier than noise ever could. Storms transformed everything. Calm water could become violent within hours, and when storms arrived, your workload increased exactly when conditions became most terrifying. Rain slammed windows, winds screamed through cracks, and waves exploded against rocks with shocking force. The entire structure shook under nature's anger, yet during those moments, your focus had to sharpen, not weaken. Sailors needed the light most when the sea became cruel, which meant your hardest work came during the worst weather. Nightfall brought the true responsibility. The lamp had to be lit at exactly the right time, neither too early nor too late. Once the flame burned, your real shift began. You monitored brightness, checked fuel, observed weather, and watched the sea for signs of trouble. Sleep became fragmented because rest could never be deep. Even while lying down, part of your mind remained alert. Any strange sound, any sudden silence, any mechanical issue could demand immediate action without warning at all. Fog was especially terrifying. Sailors feared it, and lighthouse keepers respected it deeply. Thick fog swallowed distance completely, turning nearby rocks invisible and making even familiar coastlines feel alien. Your beam weakened inside dense mist, forcing you to rely on bells, horns, or fog signals. These sounds echoed through darkness like warnings from another world. Somewhere beyond the white wall of mist, ships moved blindly, trusting that your signals would help prevent disaster before deadly impact. Sometimes you saw ships struggling in rough water, and this created a helpless kind of stress. You could guide them, warn them, and pray for them, but you could not control the sea. If a vessel struck hidden rocks, you might witness disaster unfolding in darkness with almost no power to stop it. Imagine hearing distant shouts swallowed by wind, seeing faint lanterns vanish between waves, and knowing human lives depended on forces no person could fully command or predict in stormy darkness. Symbolic transition scene showing traditional oil lighthouse lamp on one side and modern electric automated lamp on the other. Keeper watching quietly as technology replaces old methods, emotional atmosphere, balanced, warm and cool tones, medieval illuminated manuscript illustration, parchment texture, flat perspective, no border, no frame, full scene, 2 edges, ultra detailed, 16:9. This may be the strangest truth about lighthouse life. From far away, people saw only the light and assumed safety. They admired the tower as a symbol of guidance, strength, and calm reliability. Few thought about the exhausted keeper inside, climbing stairs in darkness, fighting fatigue, maintaining machinery, and carrying immense responsibility alone. The lighthouse looked steady to the world because someone inside worked tirelessly to ensure it never failed, no matter the night outside there. Why, being a lighthouse keeper was exhausting to sleep too. Morning always came too soon. Even after surviving a difficult night, the sea did not reward you with extra sleep. Duties resumed immediately. The lamp had to be extinguished properly, remaining fuel measured, and every mechanical part checked again for wear. Salt air was relentless, slowly corroding metal and weakening moving parts. Ignoring even minor damage invited future disaster, so exhaustion rarely excused negligence. The work simply continued without pause every day. Weather forecasts did not exist in the modern sense, which meant the sea often felt unpredictable and moody. You learned to read clouds, wind direction, wave patterns, and even the smell of the air. Experience became your best warning system. A sudden temperature shift or strange silence could signal incoming danger. Over time, your senses sharpened. You noticed details others ignored. Because survival often depended on recognizing trouble before the storm fully arrived near. Food presented another challenge many people never considered. Depending on the location, supply deliveries could be irregular, especially during rough weather. Fresh food spoiled quickly, so meals often relied on preserved items like salted meat, dried fish, bread, and stored grains. Variety was limited. After weeks of similar meals, even plain soup felt exciting. Hunger was manageable, but monotony wore down morale. The body survives repetition better than the human mind does for long. Loneliness changed people in subtle ways. At first, silence felt peaceful. Then it became strange. Eventually, it could become heavy enough to shape your thoughts. Some keepers talked to themselves just to hear a human voice. Others developed routines so strict they became rituals. Reading, writing, cleaning, and observation created structure against mental drift. Without routine, the endless repetition of sea and stone could slowly blur days together, until time itself felt strangely soft and unreal. Not every keeper worked completely alone. Some stations had assistants or family nearby, which helped emotionally but introduced new worries. If you had a spouse or child living with you, every storm carried additional fear. Now responsibility extended beyond ships and machinery. You worried about loved ones inside the tower while waves struck outside. Protection became personal. Courage felt different when someone you loved depended directly on your steadiness during dangerous nights and violent storms. Mechanical failure was every keeper's nightmare. A cracked lens, broken gear, jammed rotation system, or weak flame could reduce visibility at the worst possible moment. Imagine hearing violent wind outside while noticing the light rotating unevenly. Your heartbeat rises instantly. There is no time to panic. You grab tools and climb fast. Somewhere in darkness, sailors trust a beam that is suddenly failing. In those moments, technical skill mattered as much as courage and speed under pressure. Winter nights felt especially brutal. Cold sea wind slipped through tiny cracks in stone walls and stole warmth from everything. Fingers stiffened. Metal felt icy. Sleep became difficult because cold seeped into blankets and bones alike. Even indoors, comfort remained limited. Fire helped, but fuel needed management. Too much waste created future problems. Too little warmth reduced endurance. You constantly balanced present comfort against future necessity. Another exhausting calculation in an already demanding life daily. Accidents could happen even without storms. Wet stairs caused slips. Heavy equipment strained muscles. Broken glass cut hands. Burns from hot lamps were common risks. Inside a lighthouse, simple mistakes carried real consequences because help was often far away. A minor injury could quickly become dangerous if infection followed. This created constant caution. Every task demanded attention, even familiar ones. Repetition never removed risk. Sometimes it merely made danger easier to underestimate over time. Yet, despite every hardship, something kept many lighthouse keepers going. Purpose. Deep, powerful purpose. You might never meet the sailors whose lives you helped save. They might pass safely through darkness without ever seeing your face. Still, your work mattered. The light meant hope. It meant direction. It meant survival. In a world where oceans could turn deadly within minutes, a steady beam across darkness became something almost sacred for countless weary travelers at sea each night. Perhaps that is what makes lighthouse history so moving. These towers were never just buildings of stone and glass. They were promises, promises that someone remained awake while others slept, promises that guidance existed in darkness, promises that even in storms, light could endure. But every promise had a cost, and that cost was often paid by exhausted keepers climbing endless stairs through lonely nights, carrying responsibility most people never truly noticed or understood fully. Why being a lighthouse keeper was exhausting to sleep too. There were nights when absolutely nothing happened, and strangely, those nights could feel exhausting too. The sea remained calm, the lamp burned steadily, and no ships appeared on the horizon. Hours passed in deep silence, yet staying awake during peaceful nights required discipline of a different kind. Danger often arrives when routine creates comfort. The moment your focus softens is often the moment something unexpected begins, which meant boredom itself became another challenge to survive. Time behaved strangely inside a lighthouse. Without busy streets, conversations, or changing scenery, hours sometimes stretched endlessly. Midnight could feel like dawn. Dawn could feel impossibly far away. Some keepers relied on clocks, others on routines, but nearly all experienced the strange mental fog caused by repetitive isolation. Days blurred together until memories felt interchangeable. You remembered storms clearly, yet ordinary weeks could vanish into one long continuous rhythm of stone, wind, and light. The sound of the ocean never truly stopped. Waves crashed, retreated, and returned with endless repetition. At first, the rhythm felt soothing, almost meditative. Over time, however, constant sound changed meaning. You learned to hear differences hidden inside repetition. A normal crash sounded different from a dangerous swell. Calm surf sounded different from shifting tides. Your ears became trained instruments. Eventually, subtle changes in sound could wake you faster than any alarm ever could at night. Birds created their own complications. Seagulls nested around towers, circled lantern rooms, and screamed loudly at inconvenient hours. Some collided with glass during foggy nights when visibility dropped. Others made nests in places that interfered with equipment. They were beautiful creatures from a distance, but chaotic neighbors up close. Nature constantly reminded you that the lighthouse stood inside its world, not the other way around. Even small animals could complicate already demanding responsibilities every single season. Repairs became harder with age, not only the tower's age, but yours. Years of climbing stairs, carrying fuel, and enduring harsh weather slowly wore down the body. Knees stiffened, shoulders tightened, back pain became familiar. The work that once felt difficult but manageable gradually became exhausting. Yet, retirement was not always immediate or simple. Many keepers worked long past comfort because experience mattered greatly. Knowledge built over decades could not be replaced overnight by newcomers. Visitors were rare, which made them strangely exciting. Supply boats, inspectors, repair workers, or passing officials broke routine and brought human interaction. Conversations felt refreshing after long isolation. News from towns suddenly mattered. Simple gossip felt valuable. But visits also created pressure because inspections could be strict. Authorities expected precision. Every lens, record, and mechanical system needed proper maintenance. Praise felt good, but criticism carried weight because mistakes could cost lives far beyond the tower. Some keepers developed superstitions, which is hardly surprising considering the environment. Endless fog, shipwreck stories, strange sounds, and isolation can reshape the imagination. Many believed certain sounds predicted storms. Others respected unusual patterns in bird behavior or wave movement. Whether these beliefs were true mattered less than their emotional function. Superstitions offered small islands of certainty inside an unpredictable world. Humans naturally search for patterns when surrounded by forces they cannot fully control or explain. Shipwrecks left scars even when you survived them physically. Seeing disaster from a distance could haunt memory for years. You might replay moments repeatedly, wondering whether brighter light, faster reaction, or different timing could have changed the outcome. Rationally, you knew the sea often decided outcomes beyond human control. Emotionally, guilt could still linger. Responsibility creates heavy memory. The people who care most often carry the deepest burdens long after the night has passed forever. And yet, despite hardship, many keepers loved the work. That may seem surprising, but deep meaning often grows in difficult places. There was pride in reliability, pride in discipline, pride in being trusted by unseen strangers. The lighthouse demanded much, but it also offered something rare. Undeniable purpose. Each night your work mattered. The beam cutting through darkness proved that effort created safety. Few professions offered such visible proof that duty could protect human life so directly. Perhaps that is why lighthouse keepers still fascinate us today. They represent something timeless, the quiet strength of people who carry heavy responsibility without applause. No crowds celebrated their nightly effort. No grand monuments honored every difficult shift. Most worked in silence, unseen by those they protected. Yet through storms, fog, fatigue, and loneliness, they kept climbing, cleaning, repairing, and lighting the way. And that quiet resilience remains deeply powerful even now. Perhaps the greatest fear of every lighthouse keeper was surprisingly simple. Not storms, not freezing cold, and not even loneliness. The real nightmare was the light going out. That single possibility haunted every keeper because everything depended on that beam. As long as the light burned, sailors had hope. The moment darkness replaced it, danger multiplied instantly, and hidden rocks became silent killers waiting in the dark sea below that night. Imagine the horror of noticing the flame weakening during a violent storm. Wind screams outside, rain slams against the glass, and waves explode against the cliffs. Somewhere beyond the darkness, ships struggle for survival. Then the lamp flickers, just once, but once is enough to freeze your blood. Your heart races because you understand what that tiny flicker means. A small mechanical failure inside the tower could become disaster miles away at sea for strangers. History remembers many tragic shipwrecks where failed signals, poor visibility, or missing guidance helped turn danger into catastrophe. Every wreck reinforced the same painful truth. A lighthouse was never just a beautiful tower near the sea. It was often the thin line between safety and death. Captains trusted those lights deeply. Many sailors navigated deadly coastlines using familiar lighthouse beams as lifelines. If that expected light vanished, confusion could spread terrifyingly fast in darkness. When shipwrecks happened, keepers sometimes became rescuers. This meant running into brutal weather carrying ropes, lanterns, hooks, and emergency equipment while giant waves smashed against rocks nearby. The danger became immediate and deeply personal. You no longer watched suffering from a distance. Now freezing water, screaming sailors, and collapsing wooden ships existed directly before your eyes. Rescue demanded courage beyond ordinary imagination because one mistake could easily claim your life as well that night. Not every rescue ended successfully, and this reality weighed heavily on many keepers. You could do everything correctly and still lose people to the sea. Sometimes storms were too violent. Sometimes ships broke apart too quickly. Sometimes the ocean simply refused to return anyone. Those losses stayed in memory. Faces, voices, cries for help, broken wood washing ashore. All of it remained. Duty teaches strength, but even strength cannot fully erase grief from the human heart. Then, over time, a different kind of threat appeared, not from nature but from technology. Automation slowly changed lighthouse life forever. Better fuel systems, electric lamps, remote monitoring, improved optics, and automatic rotation reduced the need for constant human presence. For safety, this was remarkable progress, but for lighthouse keepers, it marked something bittersweet. The world no longer needed the same sleepless human dedication that had kept these towers alive for generations before. For generations, keepers and lighthouses felt inseparable. The tower and the human inside almost became one identity. Remove the keeper, and something emotional changed. The beam still shone across the sea, but the story became different. No more endless stair climbs, no more midnight oil refills, no more lonely watch through violent storms. Machines handled what human endurance once carried. Efficiency improved, yet many felt something deeply human disappeared with that transition forever. Imagine being among the last traditional lighthouse keepers. You know your profession is slowly fading into history. The routines that shaped your life for decades will soon disappear completely. Future generations may admire lighthouses without ever understanding the labor once required to keep them alive. That realization feels strange. Pride mixes with sadness. You know progress is necessary, yet part of you mourns the loss of a life built on sacrifice, discipline, solitude, and silent purpose. Maybe that is why lighthouse keepers still fascinate us today. They symbolize something modern life rarely makes visible: quiet responsibility carried without recognition. No applause followed their hardest nights. No crowds watched them battle storms or repair failing lamps at midnight. Most of their greatest efforts remained unseen. Yet unseen work can still save lives. In fact, some of history's most important labor has always happened far from attention. Cameras, celebration, and public praise entirely. So tonight, when you imagine a lone lighthouse shining across dark water, remember what that light truly represents. Not only navigation, not only safety, it represents endurance, duty, and quiet strength. It represents someone choosing to remain awake so others may sleep peacefully. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth of all. Even in overwhelming darkness, a single steady light, maintained with care, can guide countless souls safely home through the longest night. As the years passed and automation spread across coastlines around the world, something unusual began happening to old lighthouses. Their purpose remained, but their souls seemed to change. The light still rotated, the beam still cut through darkness, ships still used them for guidance, yet the human presence inside slowly disappeared. The footsteps on spiral stairs faded. The nightly ritual of cleaning glass and refilling lamps vanished. The quiet cough of an exhausted keeper warming himself beside a small fire became history. For centuries, people had associated safety at sea with both the tower and the person inside it. Now the tower remained, but the keeper was gone. This created a strange emotional gap. Technology had solved many problems, but it had also removed a deeply human story from the process. The world became safer and more efficient, yet somehow quieter in a way that felt almost melancholic. Some people celebrated progress. Others felt they were witnessing the end of something irreplaceable. Both were correct. Imagine visiting an old lighthouse decades after its keeper retired. The stone walls remain. The spiral staircase still twists upward exactly as before. The lantern room still faces the endless sea. But something feels different. The building is silent in a way it never was before. No oil cans rest in corners. No boots scrape against stone. No handwritten logs sit waiting on wooden tables. Perhaps an automated bulb now glows where a flame once burned. Perhaps the machinery hums quietly, doing its work without complaint, without fatigue, without emotion. Efficient, yes, but machines do not worry. Machines do not feel responsibility. Machines do not lie awake listening to storms and wondering whether unseen sailors will survive until dawn. Standing inside such a lighthouse, you begin to understand that what disappeared was not merely a profession. It was a way of life shaped by sacrifice, vigilance, and deeply personal duty. The most fascinating part of lighthouse history may be how invisible the work truly was. When a lighthouse functioned perfectly, nobody talked about the keeper. Ships passed safely, families reunited at ports, cargo arrived intact, trade continued, lives were saved quietly without headlines. Success created silence, failure created tragedy. This meant lighthouse keepers lived inside a strange reality where doing your job perfectly often meant nobody noticed you at all. There is something profound in that idea. Many of the most important forms of labor in human history share this trait. We notice them only when they stop. We think about electricity during blackouts. We think about clean water when it disappears. And sailors thought about lighthouse keepers most when the light failed. Perhaps that is why the profession carries such emotional weight even now. It represents service without recognition, effort without applause, and dedication without guarantee of gratitude. Some retired keepers described missing the night watch more than they expected. At first, this sounds absurd. Why miss exhaustion, storms, loneliness, and endless maintenance? But human psychology is complex. Purpose shapes us. Routine shapes us. Responsibility shapes us. After decades of waking at odd hours, climbing stairs, checking lamps, and scanning horizons, the nervous system adapts to that rhythm. Remove it suddenly, and silence feels unfamiliar. Some former keepers reportedly struggled with ordinary life because it lacked the intensity of meaningful duty. No urgent mechanical failures, no sudden storms, no immediate consequences attached to every action. The burden disappeared, but so did the powerful sense of necessity. Sometimes the very thing that exhausts you also becomes the thing that gives your life structure. That paradox lies at the heart of many demanding professions, and lighthouse keeping may be one of the clearest examples. There is also something deeply symbolic about lighthouses that extends beyond maritime history. Even people who know nothing about ships understand what a lighthouse represents: guidance, hope, stability, direction in darkness. Human beings naturally attach meaning to symbols, and few symbols feel more universal than a steady light during a storm. This is probably why lighthouses appear so often in stories, paintings, poetry, and films. They speak to something ancient inside us. Every person experiences periods of uncertainty, confusion, fear, or emotional darkness. In those moments, we search for orientation. We search for something steady, something reliable, something that remains visible even when everything else feels chaotic. A lighthouse embodies exactly that idea. But history reminds us of an important truth. Behind every steady light was often an exhausted human being working tirelessly to keep it alive. This may be the most overlooked lesson of all. Stability usually has a cost. Calm often exists because someone somewhere is carrying a burden you cannot see. Safe harbors existed because keepers stayed awake. Smooth systems often depend on invisible labor. Parents lose sleep so children feel secure. Medical workers endure exhausting shifts so patients survive. Engineers prevent disasters nobody ever hears about. The pattern repeats everywhere. Lighthouse keepers simply made this truth visible in dramatic form. The world saw only the beams sweeping elegantly across dark water. Very few saw the sore muscles, sleepless nights, weather-beaten hands, or constant mental pressure inside the tower. Yet, without those hidden struggles, the visible symbol of safety could not exist. This makes lighthouse history feel surprisingly modern despite belonging largely to the past. If you had asked a lighthouse keeper whether the work was worth it, the answer probably depended on the day. Asked during a peaceful sunset with calm seas and golden light reflecting on water, and perhaps the answer would be yes. Ask after 3 sleepless nights during relentless storms while repairing broken machinery with freezing hands, and the answer might sound less enthusiastic. But perhaps that is the wrong question. Maybe the better question is whether the work mattered. On that point, the answer feels obvious. Yes, profoundly. Lives depended on these towers. Entire coastlines became safer because dedicated individuals accepted difficult conditions most people would avoid. Meaning does not always make suffering pleasant, but it can make suffering bearable, and lighthouse keepers understood meaning perhaps better than most. Even today, some remote lighthouses remain active in isolated places where automation still coexists with human oversight. Though the traditional role has mostly faded, the romance and gravity of the profession remain powerful. People visit preserved lighthouses and imagine what life inside must have felt like. Tourists admire the view from the top. They photograph the ocean. They climb the stairs once and call it an experience. A real keeper climbed those same stairs countless times, often in darkness, often carrying heavy supplies, often exhausted. That contrast matters. It reminds us how icily beauty can hide labor. We admire the dramatic tower against crashing waves, but the true story lies inside the daily repetition that kept the tower functioning year after year through relentless weather and isolation. And perhaps that is why lighthouse keepers still inspire respect long after the golden age of the profession ended. They remind us that heroism is not always dramatic. Sometimes heroism looks repetitive. Sometimes it looks boring. Sometimes it looks like showing up again and again, doing necessary work carefully, even when nobody is watching. Popular stories often celebrate grand victories and dramatic action. But history is also shaped by quieter forms of endurance. The people who prevent disasters rarely become as famous as those who survive them. Lighthouse keepers belonged to that quiet category. They prevented tragedies that never happened. They guided ships that never crashed. They protected lives they never met. Their greatest achievements often left behind no visible monument except absence of disaster itself. So, as our journey continues deeper into the night, imagine once more that lone tower standing against the endless sea, Wind brushes across stone. Waves move in rhythmic darkness below. High above, the light turns steadily, sweeping across black water again and again with patient precision. Inside the tower, whether human or machine, the purpose remains unchanged. Guide, warn, protect, endure. Perhaps that simple mission explains why lighthouses continue to move us emotionally. In a world full of noise, uncertainty, and distraction, the idea of a single unwavering light remains deeply comforting. And maybe we love lighthouses because we hope that somewhere, somehow, when our own storms arrive, a light will still be waiting for us too. The longer you think about lighthouse keepers, the more you realize their greatest battle was not always against storms or darkness. Sometimes it was against exhaustion itself. Physical tiredness is difficult, but mental fatigue can be worse. Imagine being responsible for safety every night, knowing even a brief lapse in attention could matter. Human concentration is not designed to remain perfect for endless hours, yet that was exactly what the job demanded. Stay alert, stay careful, stay awake, again tomorrow, and again the day after that. Over months and years, this kind of responsibility reshapes a person from the inside. You become more observant, more disciplined, perhaps even more cautious in daily life, but it also extracts a cost. The mind learns vigilance so well that relaxing becomes strangely difficult. Even during peaceful moments, part of you remains on watch. There were probably countless nights when keepers sat beside the lamp with nothing but their thoughts for company. No voices, no conversation, only wind and sea. In such silence, the mind often wanders to strange places. Old memories return. Regrets grow louder. Small worries become large ones. Human beings are rarely prepared for prolonged isolation because our thoughts become much louder when distractions disappear. Some keepers may have found peace in solitude. Others may have struggled deeply with it, but nearly all would have experienced that strange mental state where silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling alive. The tower itself begins to feel like a companion. Every creak becomes familiar. Every sound gains meaning. The building almost develops a personality of its own. After enough nights spent alone inside it, this is what makes old lighthouse journals so fascinating whenever historians find them. Many logs appear practical at first. Wind direction, visibility, fuel levels, weather conditions, ship sightings, but sometimes, between technical notes, tiny human details appear. A short sentence about loneliness, a note about missing family, a comment about a storm that felt unusually frightening. These small fragments matter because they remind us that behind every official record stood a human being, not a machine, not a symbol. A person with emotions, fatigue, fear, and hope. History often preserves major events while losing ordinary human feelings. Yet those feelings may tell us more than statistics ever could. A single line written by an exhausted keeper can make the past feel startlingly alive. The sea also teaches humility in a way few environments can. Mountains feel powerful, but mountains stay still. The ocean moves constantly. It changes mood by the hour. Calm beauty can become violence with terrifying speed. Lighthouse keepers understood this better than most. They learned never to underestimate nature simply because conditions looked peaceful. A calm evening could become dangerous before midnight. Fog could appear without warning. Wind could shift rapidly. Confidence became useful only when balanced by respect. Arrogance near the sea is rarely rewarded. Perhaps this is why many keepers developed quiet personalities. The ocean has a way of reducing ego. When you spend years watching storms capable of destroying ships, human pride begins to feel very small by comparison. There is also something beautiful about the repetitive nature of the work. That may sound strange after discussing all the hardship, but repetition can create meaning. Light the lamp, clean the glass, check the fuel, watch the horizon, record conditions, repeat. These rituals may seem monotonous from outside, yet rituals often ground human life. They create rhythm, they create order against chaos. In a strange way, the repetitive duties of lighthouse life mirrored the lighthouse beam itself. Round and round, night after night, reliable, predictable, steady. Perhaps the keeper slowly became like the light he maintained, calm under pressure, consistent in duty, quiet in presence, strong through repetition. Sometimes identity forms not through dramatic moments, but through thousands of small, repeated actions over time. And then there were sunsets. It would be unfair to discuss lighthouse life only through suffering, because moments of breathtaking beauty also existed. Imagine standing at the top of a tower as the sun sinks slowly into the horizon, painting the ocean with orange, red, and gold. The wind feels cool but gentle. Birds glide across the fading sky. For a few minutes, the entire world feels suspended between day and night. These moments likely sustained many keepers emotionally. Beauty does not remove hardship, but it can make hardship easier to endure. Sometimes one extraordinary sunset after a difficult week can restore something inside the human spirit. Even in lonely professions, beauty can become a form of quiet companionship and healing. Nightfall, however, always returned, and with it came the old responsibility. This transition from beauty to duty happened every evening. The sun disappeared, colors faded, the sea darkened, shadows lengthened, then work resumed. The lamp had to shine. This daily transformation feels symbolic. Many meaningful responsibilities in life work the same way. There are moments of peace, joy, and rest, but eventually duty calls again. And maturity often means answering that call even when comfort tempts you otherwise. Lighthouse keepers embodied this principle perfectly. No matter how beautiful the sunset, admiration alone was never enough. The beauty had to end. The work had to begin. Romance always gave way to responsibility once darkness fully arrived. And maturity often means answering that call even when comfort tempts you otherwise. Lighthouse keepers embodied this principle perfectly. No matter how beautiful the sunset, admiration alone was never enough. The beauty had to end. The work had to begin. Romance always gave way to responsibility once darkness fully arrived. Perhaps that is why the image of a lighthouse feels almost spiritual to many people. It represents constancy in an unstable world. Storms come and go. Waves rise and fall. Fog appears and disappears. Ships arrive and leave. Entire generations pass. Yet the light remains. There is comfort in that consistency. Human beings crave anchors, something stable when life feels chaotic. The lighthouse offers exactly that. But history adds an important detail to the symbol. Constancy rarely happens by accident. Stability usually requires maintenance. Someone must tend the light. Someone must protect the system. Someone must continue showing up. That truth applies far beyond lighthouses. Nearly everything dependable in life depends on unseen care behind the scenes. If a lighthouse keeper could speak directly to us today, perhaps the message would be surprisingly simple. Respect quiet work. Respect unseen effort. Respect the burdens people carry without complaint. Modern life often celebrates visibility. We notice what is loud, dramatic, and public. Yet many essential acts happen silently. The people keeping systems functioning rarely stand in spotlights. Their contribution becomes obvious only when something fails. Lighthouse keepers understood this reality long before modern society. They worked in silence because the mission mattered more than recognition. There is wisdom in that. Not every meaningful contribution needs applause. Sometimes doing the work well is its own reward, even if few people ever fully understand the sacrifice involved. And so, as midnight deepens and the sea continues its endless rhythm below, the light keeps turning, slow, steady, patient, again across the water, again through the darkness, again toward unseen ships far away. Whether powered by flame, electricity, or automation, its purpose remains unchanged. Guide the lost, warn the careless, offer hope in darkness. Perhaps that is why lighthouse stories endure so powerfully. They remind us that even the smallest light can matter enormously when surrounded by darkness. And somewhere inside that idea lies a comforting truth for all of us. Sometimes surviving the night requires nothing more than finding one steady light and trusting it until morning comes. By now, perhaps you understand why being a lighthouse keeper was so exhausting. It was never just about climbing stairs or cleaning glass. It was about carrying invisible weight night after night. Responsibility has mass, even when you cannot physically measure it. The knowledge that unseen lives may depend on your consistency changes the way you experience every shift. Fatigue becomes more than physical. It settles into the mind, the nerves, even the heart. And yet, despite all of this, countless keepers continued doing the work with remarkable dedication. That may be the most extraordinary part of their story. Not that the job was difficult. Difficult jobs are common. What makes lighthouse keeping special is the quiet willingness to endure that difficulty for people you would likely never meet. Think about that for a moment. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, a ship moves through darkness. Families wait at distant ports. Sailors fight fatigue on deck. Merchants protect cargo. Children sleep below. None of them know your name. Most will never see your face, yet your work still matters to them. There is something deeply moving about service without personal connection. In modern life, we often expect feedback, appreciation, or acknowledgement. Lighthouse keepers rarely received any of that. A ship passing safely in darkness might never realize how much effort kept that beam alive. But the keeper knew, and perhaps that was enough. Sometimes purpose does not require recognition. Sometimes meaning exists simply in knowing the work matters, even when gratitude never arrives. There is an old kind of strength that modern life sometimes forgets to value. Quiet endurance, not dramatic bravery, not heroic speeches, just steady reliability under difficult conditions, showing up again tomorrow and again the next night, and again during storms. Lighthouse keepers embodied that strength perfectly. Their courage was rarely loud. It looked like routine. It looked like discipline. It looked like doing necessary tasks carefully, even when exhausted. Many people imagine courage as something explosive, a single moment of bold action. But history often reveals another form of courage entirely. The courage to remain consistent under pressure, the courage to keep doing difficult work long after novelty disappears, the courage to maintain the light when nobody is watching. And maybe that is why lighthouses continue appearing in dreams, stories, and imagination. They feel larger than architecture. A lighthouse is a promise that darkness does not always win, a promise that direction remains possible even when everything looks uncertain, a promise that someone, somewhere, may still be awake protecting the path ahead. That symbolism resonates because life often feels like open water at night. We all face storms eventually. Confusion arrives, fear arrives, exhaustion arrives. During those moments, even a small point of clarity can feel life-saving. The lighthouse becomes more than a structure near the sea. It becomes a symbol of guidance itself, and symbols this powerful rarely disappear from human memory. Perhaps the saddest truth about the profession is that many of its greatest successes went completely unnoticed. Think about how strange that is. The better you performed, the less anyone talked about you. No wreck meant no headlines. No tragedy meant no story. Success created silence. That silence became the reward. In a way, lighthouse keepers worked for absence. The absence of disaster, the absence of collision, the absence of loss. There is something almost philosophical about that. Much of civilization depends on invisible prevention. We celebrate dramatic rescues, but often overlook the quiet systems that prevented catastrophe in the first place. Lighthouse keepers belonged to that unseen layer of protection. They succeeded most when nothing happened at all, and that is a strangely beautiful kind of service. Now imagine the final night of a keeper's career. Perhaps he stands in the lantern room one last time. The familiar smell of oil or metal surrounds him. His hands rest on machinery he has touched thousands of times. Outside, the sea continues exactly as it always has. Waves rise and fall without concern for human endings. Wind brushes against glass. The beam turns across dark water one more time under his watch. Maybe he feels relief, maybe sadness, probably both. A lifetime of repetition has reached its final shift. Tomorrow, someone else will continue, or perhaps automation will take over completely. Either way, this chapter of his life ends here, in the same place it unfolded, inside the light above the sea. When he climbs down those stairs for the last time, each step may carry memory. Storms survived, nights endured, machinery repaired, ships guided, failures feared, small victories earned quietly. Every worn stone step contains years of labor. By the time he reaches the bottom, he is no longer simply leaving a building. He is leaving an identity. That may be the hardest part of all. Jobs can become woven into the self so deeply that stepping away feels like losing a part of who you are. The lighthouse shaped his schedule, his body, his thoughts, and his purpose for years. Now silence waits in a different form. Not isolation inside the tower, but life beyond it. Sometimes endings feel heavier than storms. Yet, even after the keepers are gone, something remains. Legacy, old towers still stand on cliffs, islands, and coastlines across the world. Some are museums now. Some still operate. Some have become ruins, but each carries stories inside stone walls. Stories of sleepless nights, cold winds, burning lamps, and quiet dedication. Visitors may climb the stairs today for photographs or views, but history lingers in every step. If you listen carefully, it almost feels possible to imagine distant footsteps ahead of you. A keeper climbing upward carrying oil, a keeper checking the lens, a keeper beginning another long night of responsibility. Buildings remember more than we realize, and lighthouses remember endurance especially well. So if someone asks whether being a lighthouse keeper was exhausting, the answer is simple. Yes, deeply exhausting, physically exhausting, mentally exhausting, emotionally exhausting. It demanded strength, discipline, resilience, technical skill, patience, and extraordinary consistency. It asked human beings to stay alert while others slept, to remain calm while storms raged, and to carry responsibility without recognition. By almost every modern standard, it was an incredibly demanding life. And yet, despite all that exhaustion, there was meaning, real meaning, the kind of meaning that makes hardship bearable, because every difficult night served a purpose larger than personal comfort. Every sacrifice helped keep someone safe in darkness, and that mattered more than sleep. And so, as our journey finally comes to an end, the night grows quiet once more. The sea continues its endless breathing below the cliffs. Stars hang above dark water. Far in the distance, one steady beam sweeps across the horizon, patient and unwavering, slow, steady, calm. Perhaps that is the final lesson of the lighthouse. You do not need to illuminate the entire ocean at once. You only need to keep your light burning steadily through the darkness. Sometimes that is enough to guide someone home. So tonight, as you close your eyes and drift toward sleep, imagine that distant light turning gently over the sea, still shining, still guiding, still enduring through the longest night. Good night, and may your waters remain calm.